Well, ICE claims that they let mostly low-risk illegals go due to those forced budget so-called sequestration cuts. But apparently that was not entirely the case, because a new report in Florida alone, 76 of 225 illegals released there had criminal convictions. To Town Hall's Katie Pavlich, who's been tracking the story. Now, leaving aside the fact that a lot of these let-goes were done prior to cuts that were supposedly coming into effect, and by the way, those specific cuts never did. The argument was that these weren't going to be dangerous people let loose. Turns out quite the opposite. How bad is this?
It's pretty bad. As we've seen in Florida, about a third of the criminals released by ICE have criminal convictions that refer to aggravated assault, robbery, drunk driving. We saw the same thing happen in Arizona and Texas. And so this really shows a gross disregard for public safety in the name of sequestration, which we've seen all along. The talking point is fear-monger to make it seem like the general public can't function without this government money being pumped into the system. But the fact is that Homeland Security has nearly 2,000 Inspector General recommendations saving billions of dollars they could have implemented a year ago to prevent these dangerous criminals from being out on the streets. And now they're there. And the question is, who's going to be held accountable if someone gets hurt, if these criminals who have been convicted go out and offend again? They have a 76%
but Katie,
chance
the argument was that the ones released, even if you argue the more dangerous ones released, they were all being monitored. I don't know whether they had those ankle bracelets or whatever. They were being monitored, so that if they were up to no good, authorities would know. And in the interim, it is a lot cheaper doing that than keeping them detained and paying a lot more. What do you say?
Right, but I can tell you that someone who gets killed by a drunk driver who happened to be let out by ICE is that question of what's cheaper is going to be a big one for the administration and for ICE. And so we can talk about the amount that it costs to keep these people in jail, but the fact is that this is kind of a doubling of resources. They're going to have to go out, use resources to monitor these people, when the fact is you look at the waste and abuse within Homeland Security, whether it's TSA buying brand new uniforms before sequestration cuts went into effect, or them having these excess gyms where they go work out. That's something that should have been looked at before deciding to release dangerous convicted criminals of felonies such as aggravated assault, theft, drunk driving onto the streets. There are alternatives here that they're just ignoring.
Well, I think the bigger issue here, whether you're on the right or left, is the fact that you were releasing people based on cuts that were supposed to happen, that, by the way, in the end never did happen in that direct area. So you were pre-cutting based on cuts that were never happening. So that argument has to be addressed, and I don't see anyone addressing it.
Well, pre-cuts and the argument that they used to push for sequestration and fear-monger in general that were never made, but also we were told that we were lied to, quite frankly, by the head of ICE when he said that we weren't going to release as many criminal illegal immigrants out onto the streets, and don't worry, they're going to be low level, when we've seen a lot of them are these high profile, the most risky types of criminals to release. And although, like you said, they are being monitored, that doesn't mean that they aren't going to commit a crime while they're in this kind of limbo of not serving their sentence and waiting for ICE to come rearrest them and throw them back in prison.
All right, DHS issued a statement on this saying, and I quote here, "These decisions were made on a case-by-case basis by career law enforcement officials in the field," apparently signaling no chicanery involved. What do you think?
Well, that would be great if it added up. Like I've been saying, there are other cuts that could have been made, other things that could have been implemented that DHS are not doing. For example, DHS is one of the worst federal agencies when it comes to not implementing Inspector General recommendations to save taxpayer money and to clean up the system. And so Janet Napolitano, who overall is in charge of all of this, saying she's done everything she can do, she has to find a way to pay for these beds, maybe she should have gone to President Obama and asked, can you please implement these taxpayer solutions that will save us billions of dollars, not just right now to offset sequester, to keep these criminals off the streets, but every single year moving forward. That's something they should have looked at when it came to paying for this type of thing.
Well, the bottom line, these sequestration effects are in, and now like cement at least through September, because the president signed off on a budget that keeps the government lights on through at least that long.